Have you ever wondered how a city can keep growing when it's surrounded by water? That's the challenge that Hong Kong has been facing for decades. With a booming population and a limited amount of land, the city has been forced to get creative. And they've come up with a solution that's as wild as it is audacious. They're building land where there was no land before. If you look at the numbers from 78 square kilometers in the 1870s to 1,108 square kilometers in 2021, you'll realize that Hong Kong has grown almost 1,400% in landmass in just 151 years. It might sound crazy, but it's true. Hong Kong is conquering land that doesn't exist through a process called reclamation. These aggressive land reclamation projects started far back in the mid-1800s by the British colonial government. At that time, Hong Kong was a small and densely populated territory with limited land resources, and the British officers saw reclamation as a way to provide more space for the growing population and to expand the economy. They wasted no time getting to work and reshaping this land into the Hong Kong we know today. One of the earliest reclamation projects was the Praia Reclamation Scheme that kicked off in 1868. The British government focused on the northern shore of Hong Kong Island in an area known as the Praia, which means waterfront. The main goal of this project was to extend the harbor to accommodate larger ships. To achieve all this, many workers construct an embankment along the river's edge to stop any high tides from flooding the mainland. The project was completed in 2 phases and took 36 years. The result of all of this? An expansion of Hong Kong Island by about 20%. This growth isn't comparable with the total growth, but it was a little at a time. But why did China go ahead with these projects, and what impact does this have on the environment? These types of projects were necessary for the growth of Hong Kong, and here are a few reasons why. The first and most obvious one being the space needed in Hong Kong. The population has risen from 560,000 to around 7.5 million people today, and they're the 4th most densely populated cities in the world with 18.078 people per square mile, just behind Singapore. There's simply not enough space for everyone in the near future. It's the limitation that pushed the government to go and develop more plans. In 2018, Carrie Lam announced a strategy that has the intention of creating 1,700 hectares of land in the form of a new artificial island off the east coast of Lantau to house an estimated 1.1 million people. The Lantau Tomorrow Vision, as this project is called, has an estimated cost of 500 billion Hong Kong dollars. The second reason is the fear of sinking as a result of climate change. The sea level around Hong Kong is predicted to rise by more than 3 feet 6 inches by the end of the century. They may not be at risk as much as countries like the Netherlands or the Maldives. Approximately 30% of Hong Kong is less than 15 feet above sea level, and these areas will be receptive to flooding as the sea level rises along with tides and storms. Maybe it doesn't sound like too much of a problem right now, but it is, or at least will be, in the future. The buildings must also comply with certain regulations. For example, Hong Kong's buildings and infrastructure must be able to withstand typhoons, floods, and rising sea levels. As you see, new developments have different requirements in all the regions due to a rising sea level. The buildings in East Hong Kong require to be at least 16.5 feet above sea level, in the west 15 feet, and in the north only about 11.5 feet above sea level. Now, you were probably thinking, what happens to the artificial islands built earlier? Well, the government has invested in the construction and maintenance of flood control infrastructure such as seawalls, drainage systems, and pumping stations to prevent flooding during heavy rain or storm surges. Thereby, building codes and regulations require developers to incorporate flood-resistant design features into new buildings and reclamations, such as elevating building entrances and electrical systems above potential flood levels. Last, the government also conducts regular inspections and maintenance of flood control infrastructure and drainage systems to ensure they're functioning properly and effectively. In the next few years, Hong Kong targets to build 430,000 public and private housing units by 2030. This target is part of the Hong Kong 2030 Plus plan, which aims to tackle the city's housing shortage and improve the quality of life for residents. This plan includes various measures to achieve this target, such as revitalizing old districts, converting industrial buildings into residential use and developing new residential areas. The government is also working to improve the efficiency of the land supply process and to encourage private developers to participate in the construction of affordable housing units. In fact, Hong Kong's government has set a target to increase their city with 2% land, putting it at an extra 8.5 square miles. So, how does land reclamation actually work? Well, first of all, despite the accepted terminology, land cannot be reclaimed from the ocean by the magic of sovereign rights. It needs to be built. For the most part, the method of fill and build was used in Hong Kong, which involves the creation of new land by filling coastal areas or shallow waters with materials such as land, gravel, and rock until the desired heights are reached. But there is a major issue. The world is running out of sand. As absurd as it may sound, sand is one of the most important yet underappreciated materials on the planet. We use up to 50 billion tons of it globally each year, making it the second most extracted and traded resource after water. Sand is the primary raw material used to construct modern cities, and everyone wants it, especially Hong Kong, which is the world's largest importer of sand and the world's largest user, importing approximately 800 million tons of sand over the last 20 years. Just for you to know, 0.6 miles of new ground required 37.5 million cubic meters of sand, or around 1.4 million dump trucks worth of that. This basically means they're transferring territories from one part of the world to another. Luckily for Hong Kong, China is the largest producer and consumer of sand in the world. That's right, they have huge reserves of sand in various regions of the world. But here's the thing. This sand-hungry world has raised concerns about environmental damage and the impact on local communities in the countries where the sand is mined. So while China may have a lot of sand, they're also trying to be more mindful of how they extract and use it. In some parts of China, there have been concerns about unsustainable sand mining practices, where miners extract sand faster than it can be replenished by natural processes. This can lead to soil erosion, landslides, air pollution, and way more. So, the Chinese government has been working to regulate sand mining and promote more sustainable practices. At the same time, transporting sand over long distances can also be costly and energy-intensive, which is why many countries, including Hong Kong, choose to import sand from other regions or countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Myanmar. This can help to reduce the environmental impact of sand mining and transportation in China, while also meeting the growing demand for construction materials. But isn't this just shifting the problem? While Hong Kong sees these projects as a solution to land scarcity, it also has a downside. As we see, sand mines will cause a lot of environmental damage in various places. Like in Indonesia, where 24 islands disappeared from the map according to the United Nations Environment Program. So, in order for land reclamation to work, you basically have to completely destroy entire biodiversities for many different species. Land reclamation destroys the seabed by extracting it from the sea and turning it to dry land. For example, coral reefs, which are home to millions of plants and animals in the ocean. These are all destroyed in the process prior to Hong Kong's land reclamation. Coral reefs are also affected by sand mining and reclamation projects. These activities can lead to increased sedimentation, which can smother and kill coral colonies. One example of a natural area that disappeared due to land excavations is the Tung Ping Shao Marine Park in Hong Kong. The marine park was known for its diverse coral reef ecosystem, but much of the reef was destroyed due to sand mining activities in the area. The destruction of this area highlights the significant impact that sand mining and reclamation projects can have on the environment. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that this method of land reclamation isn't viable in the long term. That's why they took a peek in the Netherlands. And that's when Hong Kong started to adopt a different method of land reclamation, known as the polder development method. The Netherlands had great success with the method as early as the 14th century, and in fact, it required less sand for it to work. Instead of simply adding more sand to raise the land out of its low-lying state, you build a large seawall, known as a polder, to keep seawater out of the land while drains, water pumping systems, and canals control the water levels. This technique also helps to protect against rising sea levels, but biodiversity is still completely destroyed. In the end, the people of the city had to decide whether the benefits of reclamation were worth the risks. Some were happy with the new land, but others felt like it came at too high of a cost. It was a tricky situation, but one that needed to be addressed in order to keep the city growing and thriving. We'll just have to wait and find out the worth and the risk. Thank you for watching.